So I'm going to be ranking each of the rifles from worst to best, and I'm going to be giving you a best class setup to go along with it. I did a similar video to this towards the launch of Modern Warfare, but a lot has changed. They also added the Season 1 Battle Pass, which also includes the Ram 7 Assault Rifle. I think since I've gone ahead and gotten Platinum, I have enough playtime with all the rifles to properly rank them. So go ahead and let me know down in the comments section what are other ranking videos you'd like to see on the channel. If you do enjoy the video in any way, please do me a favor hitting that like button. Let's see if we can get this video to 1,000 likes. And if you're brand new to the channel or you're part of the 88% that has not currently subscribed, I highly recommend hitting the subscribe button with notifications on to be able to find your way back to the channel. And as I generally do with these types of videos, I put the timestamp for each of the class setups in the description as well in the comments section, so hopefully that helps you guys out. So when it comes to each of the individual weapons, I'm primarily going to be talking about the 5 individual attachments I'm using on that individual weapon. As far as the rest of the loadout goes, here's typically what I like to use: EOD, Ghost, and either tune-up or shrapnel, proximity mines, or thermites, and then I used a stim shot recently, but you can go ahead and switch that up for a flash grenade or a stun grenade. So the first weapon we'll go ahead and talk about taking that 9th place spot is the FAL, and just because it's in the 9th place spot doesn't mean it's a horrible weapon by any means. It just means it's towards the bottom of the list when you compare these weapons side to side. Personally, I like to run the GI Mini Reflex for the optic, the Monolithic Suppressor, the XRK Marksman Barrel. The ammunition, I like upping that to 30 round mag. And lastly, the stipple grip tape for the extra mobility. So this weapon can actually have an incredibly fast time to kill. The real reason that it kind of falls so far on the list is because its hipfire spread is pretty atrocious. You'll see as you go for the camo challenges, if you're not using all the attachments to improve your hipfire accuracy, it is going to be a struggle. On top of that, it's semi-automatic with a very low rate of fire that was recently lowered even further to account for all those different people that are out there cheating with either a jitter mod or some kind of macro. So with that nerf, it's fallen all the way down to the 9th place spot. Let's go ahead and move on to the 8th place spot, which is the M13 Assault Rifle. And this one's pretty much so low on the list is because it's basically an SMG in the rifle category. So this one actually reminds me a lot of the Vapor from Black Ops 4. The main reason for that is because the weapon wasn't all that great. It wasn't really considered competitive, but in some scenarios, it would just completely melt. The same thing with the M13, it only melts with headshots. If you manage to land 2 or 3 headshots, you're going to drop that time to kill significantly, especially since it has one of the fastest rates of fire. But if you can't manage to hit those headshots, it basically becomes a potato gun. So the best class setup for the M13 is going to be the Mini Reflex, the Tempest Marksman Barrel, the 60 round mag, the rubberized grip tape, and the skeleton stock. And technically, if you want even faster mobility, you can actually swap out the rear grip for the stippled grip tape. So the next weapon on the list, taking that 7th place spot, has actually fallen down quite a bit because I've actually had a lot more playtime with this one. And I think if you're playing 6v6, this weapon could be pretty dominant, but once you go into the 10v10, which is a little bit larger map, or ground war, you're going to tend to suffer, and that's the FR556. And the reason why I'd say you tend to suffer at those longer ranges is because it goes from a single burst to requiring 2 or even 3 bursts to actually kill that target. And the unfortunate part of that is because it has a long burst delay, you can tend to end up losing those gunfights. So ideally you want to focus everything towards getting those 1 burst kills in the 6v6 and some of the 10v10 engagements that are a lot closer. And how you do that is you just maximize the range, because I went ahead and tested all the different recoil attachments. You're not really getting any benefit out of using those. So the best class setup for the FR556 is going to be the Mini Reflex, the Monolithic Suppressor, the FR 24.4 inch Sniper Barrel, stipple grip tape, and the FSS Tac Wrap stock. So we'll go ahead and move on to the 6th ranked weapon on this list, and that is going to be the AK-47 Assault Rifle. And this one has actually kind of fallen down a little bit. I actually put this one as being one of the number 1, number 2 weapons in the game kind of early on, competing with a lot of the good weapons at that time. And I think the biggest issue with this one has always been the recoil, which made it one of those high skill gap weapons, because if you had better skill at controlling the recoil, this would be an ideal weapon for you. But just like the FAL, it went ahead and received a stealth nerf to its overall recoil, which makes it a little bit harder to control. So even though I think it still melts and can still be dominant, I think the ease of use factor kind of drops a little bit, and it's going to be a little bit harder for the average player. So either way, the best class setup I like for the AK-47 is a mini reflex, the monolithic suppressor, the RPK barrel, the 40-round mag, as well as the skeleton stock for the extra mobility. And overall, I think it's just generally going to excel at those smaller maps. Next up on the list at that number 5 spot is going to be the FN Scar 17. And the Scar is one of those weapons that kind of sucks when you first start using it because you don't have any of the attachments that you need. You have a small magazine, but the weapon still does a ton of damage. As you level up the weapon, you're going to get all the right attachments to help you with recoil. And if you really start to understand how the weapon is supposed to be used, you can actually dominate on any of the matches in any of the lobbies, regardless of map size. And that's primarily because most of your attachments should be geared towards recoil versus actual mobility. And that kind of forces this weapon to be a little bit less mobile than some of the other weapons that we're going to see higher up on the list. One other side note with this weapon, it is always going to be 2 shots to kill if both of those shots land at the head, and that is regardless of range. So no matter how far someone is, if you land 2 headshots consecutively back to back, it will put that person down. So my Scar best class setup is the mini reflex, the monolithic suppressor, the forge tack 20-inch long barrel, the commando foregrip, and the 30-round mag. If you are a fan of the iron sights, because the iron sights aren't all that bad, you can drop the optic and actually put on the stipple grip attachment for better mobility. Next up, taking that 4th ranked spot is going to be the ODIN, and the ODIN kind of suffers from the same issues as the Scar. It has a little bit less mobility, but the recoil is more manageable and it's very consistent on the damage. So in terms of best class setup, it's very similar to the Scar. I'm going to use that mini reflex, the monolithic suppressor, the ODIN factory 810mm barrel, the Merc foregrip, and the 30-round mag. If you were planning to use this in a 6v6 or the 10v10, you could always get rid of the optic because the iron sights aren't all that bad, and do the same thing we did with the Scar, which was to put on the stipple grip tape instead of the optic to improve the mobility. So the 3rd ranked weapon on this list is actually one of my favorite weapons in the entire game. I'm so glad I was able to actually get back to it now that I've unlocked Platinum. Pretty much use any of the rifles I want on any map at any time, and that's going to be the Kilo 141. And overall, the Kilo is just one of those reliable weapons. It has consistent damage, it has reasonable rate of fire, low recoil, and there's not really a ton of downsides in terms of any area. And generally, I would consider it one of the easiest weapons to use in the entire game as far as being able to be successful with it. Regardless if you're low skilled, medium skilled, or high skilled, you should be able to do well with the Kilo. The best class setup for the Kilo 141 is going to be the mini reflex, the compensator, the Singard Arms 19.8-inch prowler, the commando foregrip, and the 60-round mag. And with this one, you can kind of mix and match a lot of the attachments. You could drop the optic and put on stippled grip tape if you want to have a little bit extra mobility. You can drop the compensator because it doesn't have a ton of recoil, and then maybe put on something else. Or if you want to hold more ammo, you can actually get rid of the 60-round mag and put on the 100-round mag, but it all depends on your preference. At the end of the day, there are a ton of good class setups for the Kilo 141. So the next weapon we'll talk about is the first rifle DLC that has been added to the game, and that is going to be the Ram 7. And this one is unlocked at tier 31 within the battle pass. Regardless if you have the free version or the premium, you will unlock this weapon at tier 31. And as you can see from the gameplay, I'm using the gold camo instead of the platinum. For whatever reason, on this particular weapon, it is bugged out and you are not able to equip it, even if you've unlocked gold for all of your assault rifles. And one of the easiest ways to look at the Ram 7 is kind of a buffed up Kilo. It pretty much has the exact same damage, but it has a faster rate of fire, better mobility, a recoil pattern that's slightly different but easy to control. And in terms of mobility, it sits at one of the best rifles in the entire rifle category. So my best class setup for the Ram 7 is going to be the mini reflex, the monolithic suppressor, the XRK Ranger barrel, the 45-round magazine, as well as the stippled grip tape. And if you want to go ahead and use the iron sights, you can go ahead and drop that optic and put on the commando foregrip. And that brings us to the number 1 weapon on this list, and that is obviously going to be the M4A1. It has been broken since launch. It's been broken during the beta. They went ahead and tried to nerf it, but for whatever reason, it is still the most popular weapon in the game. Obviously, in Call of Duty, there are some fan favorite weapons that tend to get used quite a bit, but the M4A1 is actually used more often than the 2nd ranked and the 3rd ranked weapons combined, which is kind of crazy to me. I think a majority of the people I run up against, they are using the M4, and even you've been kind of looking at that kill feed, the M4 pops up quite a bit, which is kind of unfortunate when you're trying to have a little bit of fun with different weapons that aren't quite as good as the M4. So when it comes to best class setup, this one kind of has a similar problem as the Kilo. There's not a ton of bad class setups. When it comes to the pros, they use about 5 or 6 different combinations of class setups based on preference. When it comes to pubs, you might switch that up just a little bit because you're going to run into a little bit more people than they do because they generally play 5 versus 5. So the best class setup for the M4A1 in my opinion is the Mini Reflex, the stock M16 barrel, the Commando foregrip, the 60 round mag, as well as the stippled grip tape. So there's my list ranking all the rifles from worst to best as of the 1.11 update. Hopefully you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, please do me a favor hitting that like button. And if you're brand new around here or you just haven't yet subscribed, today's the day to hit that red subscribe button, turning it to gray with notifications on. Do appreciate all the support. Thank you for watching as always. Have a great day.